Yo, what's up, everyone? Thank you for tuning in if you are or after the fact of this live stream. Today is a very awesome day for my channel, The Z Review. And yeah, I've got the only one and only an actor, director, writer, and producer of a brand new film coming out on June 17th via Fathom Event. I've got Jason Mack. So, Jason, how you doing, man?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
And my absolute pleasure. And I just want to give very quickly a massive shout out to Laurie, simply because Laurie managed to get me an early screener of A Father's Legacy. I dropped the review on my channel as well, and man, loved the movie. One big takeaway for me that I got from that movie was just the sense of it made me think after seeing the movie, and just think about kind of like just like my surroundings, about nature and my family. And yeah, I'm going to touch on that in a moment because I've got a question about that. But Jason, man, kind of want to start this off. So I know what A Father's Legacy is about. I've seen the movie. So could you tell anyone who hasn't maybe heard of the movie, or is this the first time they've kind of known about you, like what A Father's Legacy is about?
For sure. Yeah. So it follows a character, Nick, which I play in the film, who never knew his father. And so he goes out in search to find him. And along the way, he makes some really stupid decisions and essentially ends up running from the police. And he traps this old man played by Tobin Bell, played beautifully by Tobin Bell, essentially holds this man hostage in his home in the woods. And through the time they spend together, they kind of uncover secrets about their past. And some of the big themes that we explore are just like, what legacy are we leaving behind? What impact are we having on others? And even on a deeper level, just as men, are we walking around kind of burying some shame, kind of burying some unworthiness around with us? And it's like, sometimes we disqualify ourselves from having an impact. And kind of explores that and kind of dealing with some things that maybe some choices we've made or choices that have made to us, and knowing that ultimately, like, we do have something to offer.
Mhm. Yeah, man. I mean, that was summed up beautifully, being honest. I mean, that is exactly kind of what this film represents, a lot about family, community, like making those decisions in life. That's what I kind of got from the film as well. And yeah, I mean, you and Tobin Bell in the movie are awesome. The chemistry is just there. You can just tell from every scene of this movie, where it's the beginning of like a confrontation or how the film kind of develops without giving spoilers. Just yeah, that chemistry throughout, it's radiating off the screen,
So
and you
so
can
to
see it.
add with that chemistry, because I didn't know it, but this was written for Tobin, right? And I wrote it, right? But before I knew that it was going to be him, like, it was made for him. And that chemistry, like, I mean, he's a big part of my life. Like, we still exchange messages now. And actually, I shot him a text a few days ago, and I was like, yo, man, you've released plenty of films. You've been through this. This is really like my first rodeo and doing all the press and talking to people. I was like, do you have any advice? And he sends me back like the next morning, like this long message in character as Billy from the film, of like Billy's advice. And it was, I mean, it was all bullshit of like, drink, like, I owe him a beer, and, make sure you put the pickles in the refrigerator. But it was like, but that's kind of the relationship that we have. And then he did offer me some real advice, but that's the kind of relationship, that chemistry. It was, this movie is about two guys in the woods talking. And if we didn't have chemistry, it's not going to work. It's not going to be very fun to watch. So that just kind of speaks to our relationship.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And throughout the film, like for me personally, I love, you guys, hitting it off throughout, and, this small, like kind of pond lake house, setting. And, the film didn't need like multiple different, sceneries, even just this one location itself kind of just spoke volumes itself.
Yeah.
So I did check out your interview the other day with Anthony Perez,
Yeah.
his good friend. So a question I've actually got is, I learned the other day for the first time that this movie was shot on kind of like in your hometown of Carolina.
Yeah.
And I heard that a lot of the community helped out with food, or like, putting guests up in, like overnight, and, stuff like that, which is pretty awesome. And you can kind of feel that sense of community throughout. if you had a bigger budget, because I believe this was shot on a smaller budget.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So if you had that bigger budget, would you have made any changes with the film?
You know, honestly, like I would have had more days.
Yeah.
We had 15 days to shoot, and so we were like, we were clocking some days more than 10 pages a day filming, which is a lot. And the biggest thing we didn't have is we didn't have a lot of time to play, because we were still under some union rules. So it was like, you know, we were working 12-hour days, which sounds like really long days, but when you're talking about film, pre-pandemic at least, it actually wasn't really that long. Like a lot of films very much go 14, 15, 16-hour days because it's easier to pay overtime than it is to come back to a spot the next day. And so for us, we couldn't do that. So we finished every day on time. So, I mean, if I had like more money, we definitely would have had some more shoot days. We would have been able to kind of play a little bit more. But story-wise, I think I still would have shot it in the same location because there was something about being on that land of, that's where, you know, this was a love letter to my late father, right? And my father lived and loved at that pond house, you know? And so it was like something about the ground that there was love there. And I wanted that to be able to bleed through the camera, and then just the community. I mean, if we had more money, we probably definitely would have put some people up in hotels instead of like taking over people's houses. But we still ate well. Like we had people, one of the local businessmen there, Greg Thompson, owns a couple restaurants, and fed us like kings and queens. I mean, we're eating like prime rib and mashed potatoes. I mean, it was amazing. Like we weren't eating pizza, you know?
No.
So, but I mean, ultimately, like there's not much I would change about that experience and that process, because, you know, there's that saying, "Mo money, mo problems." And there isn't, you know, whether you like the film or not, or whether you have issues with it or not, I can own every frame. You know, I got to make every decision on that film, what went in, what didn't go in, and ultimately the final version is like, you know, there wasn't a ton of compromise. My goal was to literally tell the best possible story I could, make sure it was paced well, and that's what I feel like I did with the best of my ability.
Yeah. Yeah, man, 100%. So with myself, I'm actually like, I like writing books in my spare time. Um, so kind of seeing like, you know, like my creative process is like YouTube and, you know, writing those
Yeah.
books. And man, like, you know, when I seen this film and I read about your filmography, so I know you've started like Vampire Diaries and Criminal Minds, etc. There is one thing I'm going to touch on that very shortly. But you know, after you writing those kind of like short movies and starring those productions, I was going to ask you, you know, filming at this kind of lake house, especially, um, did it feel a lot different to you than say compared to like just say a backlot set, for example?
You know what's funny is at the end of the day, all that matters is what's in camera.
Yeah.
That's it. It doesn't matter if you have 10, 15, 20, 100 crew. It honestly doesn't matter. All that matters is literally what's in camera. And I think that's some of the magic and the beauty of it. And it's really easy. And I like, you're probably familiar with the Duplass brothers, right? Like they're some of the pioneers of independent film. And I mean, they're like, just do it, right? And so, you know, that's something. Look, I would love to have a 30, 40, 50 person crew. I mean, you know, like, and a little bit less overlap in jobs and a little bit more help and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, that's not what we had. But as far as filming and acting, there's really no difference. Once you get set up and once you say action, especially if it's more of a conversational piece, it's the same. There's no different. And that's actually really interesting, because I remember the first gig you mentioned at Vampire Diaries. I was in Atlanta and I had done like some smaller stuff, and so I was like, cool. And I booked the gig and I was pumped. I was like, yo, like millions of people are gonna see this. So I'm there, I go through makeup, and it's still the most intensive makeup process I've had, because like on the CW, everyone has to be like perfectly beautiful. So I think my hair, I looked about as beautiful as I could ever look in this life. They did me up. And I'm waiting in my waiting room, and I'm like, this is fun. And, you know, like I go to the bathroom, and there's like Ian Somerhalder, and I'm like, what's up, dude? And, you know, and everybody's really nice. We start walking out to the woods where we're going to shoot. And I get real nervous. I'm like, oh my gosh, like can I do this? And I only had, I think like that day, I only had like one line. Like, we don't want any trouble here. That was my line. And I could not remember it. I was like, we're like doing a rehearsal. And I remember, I think it was Paul Wesley was his name. And we're all out there and they're going through it. And it comes time for my line. And I just drew a blank and I was like, oh, is it my turn? Just trying to buy time. But ultimately, I mean, it ended up okay, but it was cool. And that was like, they spend millions of dollars on an episode.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we had probably what they spend for food in a couple weeks, like for our whole budget. So it's different, but at the end of the day, the fundamentals, it's the same.
Yeah. No, man, but that's awesome to hear about your experience on, like, say, you know, on like a multi-million-dollar level kind of set to, you know, this like kind of small location on a smaller budget. And we, you know, you tend to find a lot of the time the smaller budget movies are a lot more successful. And I felt like when I was watching this movie, it didn't really feel like a small budget. And one thing I kind of wanted to mention, so I noticed in your acting credits, I think it was around 2012, 2013, you were on a show called Revolution,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
in particular called Sergeant Tobin.
yeah.
Did that have any influence in picking Tobin Bell?
It's so funny, man. Like you look at that, and my name was Sergeant Tobin on that show. When I was rehearsing with Tobin, or we were going over the script at his place before we went to South Carolina, I mean, he had intensive notes. Like I can't speak enough about his craftsmanship and his thoughtfulness in this project. And so he disappears. He goes into another room for a minute, and he comes back, and he puts down the little puppet from Saw, you know, the little scary thing. And he's like, you know, do you know what his name is? And I was like, not off the top of my head. He's like, Billy. And I'm like, no way, right? And then I think I admitted this to Anthony in our interview, but like in the opening of the film, Tobin's character is doing a puzzle, and it says Jigsaw right there. I kid you not. I'm big into preparation, but sometimes there's just like happenstance.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. We shot this film in 2018, right?
Right.
And I had to do some changes on the aspect ratio for the Fathom release. So I'm going through it frame by frame, shot by shot, and I see Jigsaw, and it really, like, I connected the dots for the first time. And I'm like, and I took a picture of it to Tobin. I sent it to him. I was like, people are going to think we did this on purpose. But it was completely just like, I think this dude would do puzzles in the woods. And that's what we had like at my mom's house, you know? So we just put it in there. So yeah. So the truth is it was a happy accident, but that's the thing, man. Is it coincidence? Is it fate? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure, like, as people get to check out this movie, we've got the reference of Jigsaw, we've got the reference of Billy. There might even be, you know, if you played in slow back, you might even get more references.
Well, what's funny is like, so the trailer, I'm breaking all the rules, right? You're not supposed to, you know, everyone knows you're not supposed to read the comments on social media. You're not supposed to read the reviews, but I'm like, you only live once.
Yeah.
So the trailer came out, and which blew me away because a lot of people have seen it. But the comments are like, this is like a prequel to Saw, like he's teaching his son how to be the next Jigsaw. And I didn't even, once again, I didn't realize like these words were written before Tobin was involved. But he's talking about like at the center of every circle is a choice. And I'm like, yeah, dude. And people are just like picking up on it, which I love, right? But I did not see that coming on purpose.
No. Well, man, if we see you in Spiral 2, we'll know why, yeah?
Yeah. I'm like, here's the campaign. There's this inspirational, really family film, but you know, I think Nick really could be the next Jigsaw.
Yeah, definitely. Well, man, I've got a couple more questions because I know we're on a bit of a tight schedule today. So one question I really have is for people like myself again, who are like maybe writers or like, you know, us creators on YouTube, for example. Would this be your directorial debut? What advice would you give someone, say like myself or anyone watching, to, you know, kind of push them boundaries and, you know, get into doing that directing if they really wanted to?
You know, my answer is, which isn't very like sugar coated, but it's just kind of like, you have to do it. right?
Yeah.
And whatever reason you have for not doing it, you know, is garbage. And so I didn't go to film school. No one taught me how to write a script. Like I just kind of like went online and Googled and just was on sets and made my own mistakes. So I mean, I think the key is you just have to do it. I mean, and you are, like you said, you like to write, you know, books in your spare time. It's like you do it, then you go back and you're like, oh, okay, well, you know, also I think we have to be honest with ourselves. And just because we create something doesn't, like, yes, that's good that we created something, but that doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah.
And you know, and that's one of the biggest things I see with kind of younger filmmakers is there's, you know, like there's a little, just because you cross the finish line with a draft or a finished project doesn't necessarily mean you're done. And for our script, I mean, I can't even tell you how many drafts of the script we went through for the feature, but even shorts, it's like continually going through it. It's like once you finish your first draft, you know, you just have to know that like it's not good. No matter how good you think it is, just know that it's not good, and how can we make it better? I see too many people making shorts and even features with just almost like a first, second, or third draft of their script, and it's like the problems don't go away. You have to fix them. But do it. Just do it. I shot a short on my iPhone like in December. I wanted to make a little, I wanted to make a little horror, and it's I think it's a fascinating genre, and I was like, I just want to play a little bit with my friends. And so me and two actors went and just did a horror. I did it literally on my iPhone, and I think it turned out well. But you can do amazing stuff with your phone.
Yeah, I mean, especially like the camera quality on phones nowadays.
Yeah.
Definitely. Man, well, that's an awesome answer, and it's just like really inspiring for myself personally. You know, for again, I like writing, and many other people might have similar things on YouTube. So I've got a couple more questions kind of just before we wrap things up. So
And
one
we're
of them
good.
was,
Like, don't worry about like we can go, you know, like to 30 minutes or whatever. It's fine. Yeah.
oh, cool.
I love talking about the process. I love talking about filmmaking. It just jazzes me up. And also as you, like, you're a creator, and you know, it's like with your YouTube channel, you know, like you're taking your shot. You know what I mean? You're not waiting for somebody to give you permission, or waiting for, you know, Cinema Blend or Coming Soon or somebody to contact you. You're like, yo, I'm gonna put my stuff out there. And that's the amazing thing about where we're at right now. I love talking about that stuff.
Dude, thank you so much. Yeah, man. Like, you couldn't be honest. I've got kind of similar mentality to yourself. Like with YouTube, for example, I just thought, right, one day I'm gonna put myself out there. I've got thoughts on movies, and Back to the Future. That's kind of my niche. And I thought, right, I'm gonna do it. If it sucks, you know, I can delete the video, so I can delete my page. You know, um, but you know, over time, probably like yourself, you know, starting out as actor and doing short movies, you know, you've come up to like this big spectacle where you've got to do your first feature, and with Tobin Bell, dude, that's huge.
Right. Right.
And yeah, and you know, like myself, I've progressed from like doing this for nearly 3 years, from being like this shy, you know, young kid, don't know a clue about editing, nothing, man, to like hosting a live stream, which is, you know, pretty brand new.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, like I just honestly really respect the fact that you did this feature, and it, you know, it turned out awesome. Like, I love the movie. For anyone that's watching, because a lot of my viewers are in the UK, I know this is going to be released as a Fathom event on June 17th. I believe it's going to be in 700 theaters or so.
Yeah.
Is that?
In the US.
Yeah.
In the US.
In the US.
And for the UK, for those folks over there, I'm hoping to finalize it in the next week or two.
Okay.
Some distribution over in the UK. So it should be over there shortly, soon enough.
Yeah. Man, I hope so, because if it was in the UK, I would still go out and go watch it again.
Yeah.
Although I've got the screen here, I'll actually go support it as well, man, because I actually love the film. So my big question is really, so my takeaway from the film I mentioned a bit earlier was, after I watched this movie, man, being honest, I stopped, I thought about this movie again. It made me just realize, right, you know, like my family around me, my friends, like nature, and, you know, like going out, because, you know, for example, I like going to the arcades, or I like just going for a walk along the beach. And this movie kind of just made me realize a lot about that. So for anyone watching, or who's going to watch this movie, what would you want the audience to take away from watching A Father's Legacy?
You know, there's two big things, and the first one is when they get done, and I love, because I've heard this from some people, and it makes my heart grow a little bit, is that they got done and they immediately like called someone that they loved or whatever, and they were like, hey, I just want to tell you, like, I appreciate you and I love you. And like, that's huge, right? That's what I want, is I want us to appreciate the people in our lives, like, while we have them. And the second is, what impact are we having on those people around us? You know, we can have a positive impact or we can have a negative impact, and the choice really is ours. I mean, I don't know if, you know, when you started getting into the YouTube game, or I know you've got like kind of your community, but you know, it's like you guys probably swap some tips and stuff like that. And you know, it's like you're building each other up. You know what I mean? And there's going to come a point to where there's going to be a young dude who's going to come to you and be like, yo, like, how have you done this? How have you built this audience? And, you know, you can give them like, hey, here's some things I did that were really good, and here's some things that you can just avoid and save the time. And it's like, but the thing is right, Mike, that's your legacy. Yeah. You know, that's something that you can leave behind and hopefully imprint on them, and they'll leave to the next and they'll leave to the next. And so my hope is that, you know, I guess a little bit paying it forward, but you know, that's the hope, is that we impact those that we can.
Yeah, man. Like, I couldn't say it better. Yeah. So for myself, like being on like YouTube, like for a year and a half or so, I was posting videos here and there, and I didn't really feel like I had like a big like community at that time. And after kind of that time, I got in touch with Anthony Perez, who you spoke to a couple of days ago, and he's really built this like big YouTube community where like quite a few of us are in it, and we collab on each other's channels and give each other like feedback and my editing. And again, man, I've never touched a live stream in my life.
Is this the first one?
Well, I did one last night as a test, because I thought if I went into this today and it went up the wall, I thought no. So you're my second guest, so
there
again, thank you. So yeah, one thing I wanted to mention, man, as well, on kind of the back of that, so I know the other day from doing the live stream with Anthony, you touched on kind of like future projects. You mentioned about reading over some scripts, and you mentioned about horror as well. Is there anything else you can kind of tell me about that, or any ideas? Because myself and my partner, we love horror movies.
I'm fascinated. I was never like a horror nut growing up. I think because I get scared really easy. But as I dive more into the genre, there's things you can do that you can't do in just like kind of a straight narrative. And so like I went to go see A Quiet Place Part 2 last night. It was my return to the movies after like a year. And what I love about that is it's a horror movie, but it's really a family drama. And when you kind of package it like that, it's like, well, there's something to say. And I think the reason those movies have been really successful is because John Krasinski's like, he has something to say, right? The first film was like a love letter to his kids, and you could tell the family. And the second one is like really the kids kind of growing up and finding their own power within themselves. And it's just like, when you have a message like that, it just really grounds it. And that's what really resonates with me, because, I've just learned that as I get older and figure out who I am more as a person, there's certain core values that I have, and that if I go against them, it's very, very difficult for me to kind of create, right? So it's like which makes it difficult in horror, because you know what I mean? Because there can be some nasty stuff, but so it's like figuring out what I have to say, and then there's a book that I would really love to make into a film. I can't say what it is, but I read it. I read it a few months ago, and I was like, this would be cool. And I kind of talked to, my producer partner, and I was like, yeah, this is cool. You should read it. And now in like past couple of weeks, I'm like, I just want to make it. Like, I know even more so, like I know the end, I know the things that I want to bring out. And so we're going to start really, looking into that. And seeing if it's an option, if it's available, but and that would be a pretty big jump, because that's definitely not like a low budget film. But yeah, and then there's another. I was spitballing with my producing partner yesterday, and there was a horror idea that really like kind of clicked with me. So I'm doing a lot of kind of digging on that. So I
Yeah.
really just didn't give you any details on anything, but just like, figuring out what it is. Like the process takes so long and
Mhm.
it's so hard, especially at an independent level. And like I wrote this script in 2017. So for me to now be here 4 years later, the movie's actually coming out, it's a long time.
Yeah.
Like you have to believe in
Yeah.
what you're doing.
Oh, definitely. And man, I say I've seen the movie. It's definitely paid off, and I can't wait for other people to check this out as well. And one thing I actually really respect that you've touched on is the fact that you've been looking at other scripts and looking about going into maybe a different genre after Father's Legacy, which is awesome because a lot of producers, which I'm not going to mention any names or anything, of course, but they tend to stick to one genre and that's it. And maybe specialize in that, which is cool. That works for them. Great. But one thing I actually really respect is that say you want to jump into a different genre and you want to just branch out there a lot more, which is just awesome. And again, I think for people like myself, like creators, it's just really kind of cool and humbling to like hear something like that, man. So that's awesome. Yeah.
For
And
sure. Yeah.
and if you were to do a horror movie, is this going to be a Jason Tobin part 2? Or are we going to see you guys as main leads?
We were talking, we were like, would Tobin come do it? Like, and it depends. Like, I mean, obviously, horror is, I mean, he's an icon,
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, I think that he's up there with, the Halloweens and the Friday the 13th. Like, I mean, it's like, it truly is, I think at least modern day, especially like
Yeah.
iconic. Which is funny because when we first met, I kind of asked him about it. I said, yo, when you were saying those lines about playing a game, did you even think that those were going to be like iconic? Like that line's going to live forever. And he was like, no, you just, they never thought there was going to be more than one.
Yeah.
No less like 9 or 10 or however many there's been,
Of
So
course.
yeah. And it's just, as a creator, man, we just have to create and do stuff we believe in.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And man, kind of just to wrap this up, and because I honestly really, really appreciate your time. Um, that you speak of horror. What would you say is your favorite horror film?
Ooh.
Not to put you on the spot or anything,
Yeah, it's like, I think the one that probably like trips me out the most watching it was there's a few. I remember watching Scream as a kid. I had a buddy, Grant, he lived down the street, so I would run over to his house. We watched the movie, and then I had to like come back home and it was like dark.
Yeah.
And there was like some fog that was out, and I remember being like super scared, like I sprinted. And I think, I was like, that's what horror can do to you. I think more as an adult, I went back and watched The Strangers for the first time with Liv Tyler, Scott Speedman. And that whole concept really trips me out. And that's actually the short I did. You can see it on my YouTube channel, Wrong House. I shot that with my iPhone. And that was a little bit of a take on kind of The Strangers and just something like that to play with. And I have to say, like, A Quiet Place I really, really enjoyed, because just from a creative aspect of just being like, it's in the wrapping of a horror, but this is a family drama. And as a creator, like, that opens a lot of doors for me, and being like, maybe I do have something to say in this genre. Because I think before I really saw A Quiet Place, I think I disqualified myself from horror because I was like, well, I don't really want to tell stories about demons. Like, I think slasher flicks are cool and but it's like, I don't know if I could commit like 2 or 3 years of my life to doing that story. Just because it's like, man, like, the world's a messy place, it's like, I don't know if I want to like put my soul there. So Quiet Place was really like, just as a creator, seeing that was like, oh, okay, there's like, this is a really different way to approach this.
Yeah. Yeah, man, definitely. And kind of similar to yourself, I'm not a huge fan of like demon movies. You know, you see it far too many of them nowadays. So
Yeah,
I respect the fact that you want to kind of go more grounded. And just again, I felt like this film, you know, Father's Legacy was slightly different to what we've got kind of like on the market nowadays. And again, I really respect that. And yeah, man, I'm looking forward to your future projects, whether it's horror, whether it's the same genre, whether you choose, whatever you choose, man, I'm really looking forward to it. Also, guys, I've left in the link of the description Jason Mack's website. Because I believe you're not
boom.
on social media, man.
Nah, man, I'm living that 90s life, you know? So I'm
Right.
just on I'mJasonMack.com. And it's good because it just kind of keeps things simple. But I mean, if you want to reach out, there's a contact form, you know? So just hit it up.
Yeah. Man, it certainly will, yeah. And Jason, I just want to say, man, thank you so much for being my second ever guest on the live stream. Honestly, it's been so humbling talking to you, and just the fact that I'm talking to like another creator is just really just a blessing for me, man. So thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
No, my pleasure. And yeah, guys, thanks for tuning in. Jason, with my kind of like wrap up on my segments on YouTube, I just got to say, so this has been the Z Review with Jason Mack, and we'll be seeing you later.